So we just move quickly. We go, we don't take any breaks. There's no breaths in any of this kind of stuff. We're doing all this stuff virtually. Now we're going to our good friend, and we have the distinct pleasure to introduce our next keynote, the Honorable Jim Carr, who of course is the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg South Centre and Special Representative for the Prairies. Minister Carr was first elected MP for Winnipeg South Centre in 2015. He was appointed Minister of Natural Resources in 2015 as well, and Minister of International Trade Diversification in 2018. A dedicated business and community leader in Winnipeg for more than 30 years, including a career as and everyone always mentions the oboist, right? Every time we introduce you, Joe, or Jim, we have to throw in the oboist. So an oboist with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, and then of course a journalist. Minister Carr entered public life in '88, elected to represent Fort Rouge in the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba, and also the deputy leader of the party, and went on to become the founding CEO of the Business Council of Manitoba, where he worked alongside business leaders to address critical issues for Manitobans and Canadians. Minister Carr, always a pleasure to have you join us here at the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for spending a couple of minutes with us this morning. I know I'm going to provide you with an opportunity to provide some opening comments, and then you and I will have a bit of a discussion for a little bit of time. So welcome, and the floor is yours, Minister.
Hi, Chuck. It's really good to be part of the AGM, however, virtually. And I'm sitting here in my house in Treaty 1 territory, and the home of the Métis Nation and the territory of the Anishinaabe peoples. And do you know that I haven't really budged from this chair in 15 months? I haven't been on an airplane. I haven't been in a taxi. I haven't taken my seat in the House of Commons. And I pilot this super pro computer from the Peace River country through the canola fields of Saskatchewan and all the way to the hydro dams in Manitoba. It's an unusual way of communicating with people, but you can make tracks, and you can, in the course of a morning, talk to an awful lot of people about the diversity of issues and the variety of people living in our Prairie region. And it's my job to take out the megaphone and put it around the cabinet table, so people at the center of the government have a very good understanding of what's on the minds of Prairie folk. So we've just experienced, as everybody on this call knows, the greatest contraction of our economy since the Great Depression. And I doubt there's a single person in this room who hasn't felt the impact of this. And yet, through the past year, we've also witnessed the resolve of Prairie people. We've witnessed sacrifices made by frontline workers, by employers, by families, and we've witnessed that Prairie resilience that makes us who we are. And Chuck, of course, this will not come as news to you. You have been a tireless advocate for the local business community since the very start of the pandemic, and might I add, long before. We're not through it yet, and our government understands this. And as you know, the 2021 budget was a comprehensive document. In all my years of assessing documents as a journalist, as a politician, as a business council president, I've never seen anything like it. Over 270 initiatives across 720 pages, comprehensive. It'll take weeks before Canadians understand the full extent of what's being recommended here and what will be implemented. And the Prairies will see themselves throughout the document. It was comprehensive, but it's essentially about three things: healing the economic wounds of the COVID recession, creating jobs, and laying down the building blocks for a future to which our economy is more resilient than ever before. And we couldn't possibly have known when we started this journey the twists and turns that this would take. We had to be nimble, we had to adjust, and we didn't always get it right. We had to keep our ears wide open for people who were beneficiaries of our programs and for people for whom the programs didn't do enough. And I think it's important that we continue to be nimble and continue to be alert to feedback. We were in a rush, Chuck. We were in a rush because we felt the intense need of Canadians to keep them whole through the pandemic, through a variety of programs. And when you're in a rush, Perfection can be elusive, but you have to have the humility to understand that when you trip, you get up, you look behind you, you see where the problem is, and you seek to fix it. But these programs have been impactful. The wage subsidy has helped Canadians and businesses like those of you here today keep more than 175,000 Manitobans on the job, totaling $2.2 billion in support. The rent subsidy and lockdown support have helped more than 9,000 Manitoba businesses with rent, mortgage, and other expenses. But the battle against COVID is not over, and neither are these supports. We are extending these programs until at least September the 25th. And one of the most critical programs in the budget is the new Canada Recovery Hiring Program. It will offset a portion of the extra costs that you as employers take on as you reopen your businesses, either by increasing wages or hours worked or hiring more staff. The aim is to make it as easy as possible for you to hire new people as the economy reopens. All of these programs are geared towards helping us move past this pandemic. And when we do, and we will, the Prairies will emerge stronger. This budget will create 500,000 new work opportunities for Canadians, and we will hit our target of adding 1 million new jobs by the end of this year. Stereotypes are often a barrier to progress, but there's one stereotype that I like a lot, and that is Dr. Michael Houghton, a Nobel Prize laureate working out of the University of Alberta for his work in establishing hepatitis C vaccinations. And when you add to the work that he is doing in Edmonton, to the Vito Intervac vaccine work in Saskatoon, and our own national microbiology laboratory in Winnipeg, you have a prairie cluster of really smart people who in turn attract others who want to participate in the work that they're doing. So I think that prairie folks should realize that this is not just a prairie success, it's a Canadian success. And now the federal government will invest $2.2 billion towards growing our vibrant domestic life sciences sector. And the investment will be instrumental in supporting Canada's talent pipeline, research systems, and the economic development that will come of it. We're going to cover a lot of ground, I'm sure, Chuck, but I wouldn't want this point to get lost. Western diversification is taking on an entirely new look. The government of Canada has taken the decision to hive off British Columbia from WD and set up a standalone Prairie Development Agency. And the good news is we in the Prairies keep all the money, and it is significant. So it comes with a permanent 70% increase to existing funding. So I think the new and revitalized role of the Prairie Regional Development Agency will let government do what it does best, to partner with governments of other stripes, to reach out to the entrepreneurs, after all, the creators of wealth and the creators of jobs, so that the government is an enabler, a facilitator, but with increased resources, all directed toward the objective of further diversifying the Western Canadian economy. And you also know that we created the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. This is a $2 billion fund administered through the economic development agencies, which has provided much needed liquidity to businesses, including many, I think, in attendance here today, helping bridge them to recovery and preserving more than 125,000 jobs. And we're going to invest an additional $1.2 billion to help the tourism sector, including community festivals and events. I have met with many of you over the course of the pre-budget period, and I'm sure that you will see many of your suggestions in this comprehensive budget. I know that This has been an intense and anxious time for you as citizens, as members of families. In my own case, several of my grandchildren have not met each other yet because of restrictions. These are the sacrifices that we're all having to make. But we are now optimistic that because of the cooperation of Canadians, because of the abundant supply of vaccines and their increasingly effective rollout by the provinces, that better days are not very far away. Chuck, I'll stop there and look forward to our conversation.
Minister Carr, thank you as always for spending some time with us. And I think you provided some great commentary at the beginning as well, just in regards to the challenges that something like the pandemic has provided. A lot of times, when government's rolling out a variety of different programs, they always want to try to make sure that they get it right the first time. And so there can be a real slow rollout of different things. And I just want to take this opportunity, to recognize that, over the course of this pandemic, I've had regular discussions with Minister Jolie and Minister Ng on weekends and evenings. There's been calls just to make sure that they're getting that proper feedback from the business community and organizations like ourselves. And maybe just talk a little bit about that around the cabinet table as you're kind of rolling out these programs, taking that approach that we don't have to get it perfect, but at the same time, if we need to be able to get that feedback, and I think the wage subsidy is the perfect example as how the government rolled a program out, recognized it was not going to have the impact it wanted, and then was able to work with a program that has been extremely successful and really been a lifeline for a lot of businesses throughout Canada.
You have to have the humility to know that you might not have it right, and you might not have all the answers. And if your ears are wide open, and if you have the sense of the integrity of leadership, you know that you have to adjust in ways that respond to the impact of these programs on the ground. And that's how we approached it. And we knew coming out of the gate that there would be mistakes because of speed, but speed was the predominant value here because people were hurting. And we had been told by many businesses that without the wage support program, they wouldn't have been able to maintain their operations. Difficult enough as it is. So I think that is a very good lesson for government. And also the pandemic has taught us that there's a very important role for the government of Canada to play in the lives of its citizens through these direct transfers. Canada has been there for communities, for cultural and artistic organizations. You know now, of course, that there has been a $1.9 billion recapitalization of the Trades Corridor Initiative, which is very important for Manitoba. So we attempted in the budget, with all of its complexity, to respond to what we had been hearing from Prairie people. One other small example, it was really an irritant that farmers, producers, were having to pay tax on grain drying. And it was an irritant that really dominated a lot of conversations I've had right across the prairie. We listened to them and we responded to them. And I think that those two words are absolutely essential. We listened and we responded. And this is the kind of relationship that the government seeks to establish with individual Canadians and their businesses and their communities. That Canada has stepped up. Working with provinces, we have no interest in partisan bickering, and neither do Canadians. The premiers, I believe, who have understood that our citizens, of whom we represent all, are much more interested in governments aligning interests and working together than jurisdictional bickering. And I think that's another message of the last number of months. All this done, Chuck, in a virtual environment. No handshakes, no hugs, no beers, no casual conversations in coffee shops. But at the same time, our reach can be vast thanks to technology, which enables us to be in touch with the richness and the diversity that is the prairie. So that is the changing landscape in which we're all operating right now. Can hardly wait to get back to my seat in the House of Commons, but it's just not likely going to be next week.
Minister, let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that's the huge challenge for, even us having to do this event remotely. Typically, we're in a room somewhere, and I've got 100 different business leaders and chambers from throughout Manitoba as well taking part in that. But, being in a role like yourself, having that outreach across Western Canada and having to do it from your home office, and to be able to really get that, what's kind of going on the ground, and trying to be able to get a better understanding as to how people are actually being impacted. What are some of the challenges that creates in terms of a government is not being able to have that sort of one-on-one discussions and, to be able to make some of those decisions in a timely manner?
The challenge is that you don't have the intimacy of conversation, and you don't have the body language, you don't have the group dynamic that is so important around a committee table or in a field. So you don't get the hands-on experience that you otherwise would. But the advantage is that you can cover a lot of geography in a short period of time. Chuck, I can drop into the Cattlemen's Association first thing in the morning, do a Q&A with the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce mid-morning, and then come back to Manitoba and talk to the chamber in late morning, and it's not even lunchtime yet. So what we lose in the intimacy that a personal relationship allows, we make up for in our capacity to reach out much more broadly and to capture the diversity and the richness, which is the Prairie region. We're very different from one province to the next. Even within provinces, there are wide varieties of industrial pockets of activity. Look just across our region. When you assess oil and gas, renewable energy, the hydrogen economy, carbon capture, utilization and storage, the life sciences, value-added agriculture, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, the importance of immigration policy for our workforce, and on and on and on. What's important is that the center of the government of Canada is aware of that diversity, aware of what programs are impactful. We have to be able to deliver in ways that mean something. And the only way you can do that is to have a better understanding of what people need and what they want. And that is the essential work that I'm doing on behalf of the government right now.
Minister, last month, and you touched upon this, the federal government released a massive budget, 207 different initiatives, 720 pages, a document we've probably never seen before in Canada in terms of a budget document. There have been obviously, releasing some, a document like this in the middle of a pandemic provided a number of initiatives kind of going forward. I know, and there's been concerns obviously in terms of the size of the debt and the deficit and how we address some of those issues, and I think that's important to look at long term. But I wonder if just maybe for, the people that we have on the line today with us, from a federal budget perspective, what should they look at from a Manitoba perspective? What are some of the highlights for you that you would want to encourage, make sure that our members are aware of that in terms of the impact that budget is going to have on Manitoba businesses?
Well, my first comment would be Manitobans are Canadians. Manitobans have children. Manitobans have a tough time finding childcare. And one of the signature policies of this budget is to ramp up investment over 5 years by $30 billion. We do not see childcare as only a social policy. It's an economic policy. And nobody would know that, Chuck, better than your members, and your members on the line right now. To unleash the power of mostly women into the workforce by providing affordable childcare is an essential part of rebuilding and moving forward. So that we can take full advantage of the entrepreneurial talent that so many women are just yearning to express but can't because the unavailability of affordable childcare. So that is a signature piece. A $2.2 billion investment in the life sciences, much of that across the prairie, is looking ahead to Canadian self-sufficiency and the production of vaccines, working on the cutting edge of solving some of the great puzzles, as we have done through the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg in discovering the vaccine for the Ebola virus. That is a big deal that saves thousands of lives. And then to maintain these support programs. It's very important that we don't assume that the need is winding down until it is. And that's why we have often said that we'll do what it takes for as long as it takes to keep Canadians whole as we prepare for the next phase of economic rebuilding, which I'm convinced is not very far away. And then there are all kinds of other individual initiatives. The 90-day discussion about carbon capture, utilization, and storage was something that the energy sector has been calling for. We've delivered it. We've said, let's take 90 days to talk to the industry about the best form in which that could take. It's going to stimulate considerable investment. And also to say that it's the entrepreneur. And Chuck, you remember I would say this a lot when I was at the Business Council of Manitoba. It's very nice for us to have these intelligent conversations about how to distribute the national wealth. We should spend more time talking about creating value, creating employment, creating wealth. And we as government are enablers. You, the entrepreneur, are the ones who actually do the work on the ground. We are there to support, to facilitate, and to partner. And the Regional Development Agency, whose mandate is going to be to diversify the Western Canadian economy, the prairie economy, is charged exactly with that mission. And I have to say, I'm very excited as we begin to roll out those programs, and very excited about working with you and your businesses to take full advantage of this new investment.
And great announcement in terms of the role of WD. And we've had great discussions with department officials here in Manitoba and looking at what that's potentially going to look like. And some of the impacts align with a number of the things that our organization is focused on as well. Skills development in terms of digital transformation, support local campaigns, and these kind of things are going to be critical as we start talking recovery. So I'm interested in terms of what that's going to look like once WD and some of the programs are established. And, I think those additional dollars will be significant. One of the things, I know we're almost running out of time, and you and I could have these kind of discussions all day. I want to talk a little bit about, and you as your time with the Business Council as well, that the one thing business always loves is they love certainty, and they want some certainty kind of going forward in terms of what we're looking for. And it's been one of the challenges, I know, that when we had a discussion with Per and Beatty earlier today, it's really having a better understanding of what that roadmap to recovery looks like, and in terms of providing business with a little bit of certainty. And I know the Prime Minister has made comments earlier this week in regards to this being sort of a one-dose summer, and over the course of the summer, everybody should have the ability to have sort of those needles in arms. I know this is certain to certain provinces, are their vaccination levels are different at different levels as well. But from a federal government perspective, what does that recovery look like, and what do you provide to business to say, once we hit certain vaccination levels, once we get to this, that we can kind of get back to here's what Manitobans or Canadians are going to have the ability to do. So how do you maybe respond to that? What does the federal government look at that sort of roadmap to recovery? And what does that path look like?
I want to agree with your premise that business yearns for certainty. Pandemics are uncertain. And what looks to be nearly certain on a Monday can be less certain on Friday, because of events that are beyond our control. But I think we're reaching a point now where it's getting easier to predict what percentage of the population will be vaccinated by the end of June, what percentage by September, and how we lift restrictions according to that safety zone that will be created by Canadians getting vaccinated. So I think it's becoming clearer I understand why public health officials would be reluctant to be too definitive about it, because with variants of concern being what they are, and because of continuing scientific research that's proceeding about the effectiveness of double doses and the mixing of doses, that there has to be some caution. But I think there's no doubt that because Canadians are overwhelmingly telling us they want to be vaccinated, because to a large extent they are practicing smart public health practices, that we're on the right road and there is cause for optimism. So while the blueprint may not be quite as complete as most business people will like, I think that it's getting clearer and clearer every week, and that we're going to land in a better place very soon.
Minister Carr, I know I could spend a lot more time talking to you with you, and I always appreciate that. And I'm so glad to see you back in the chair, and I hope you're in good health as well, sir. Thank you for taking the time to address the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce and all of our members today. And I just want to, on behalf of our membership, a huge thank you to the federal government for some of the measures that you've taken, and we look forward to continued discussions with you as we continue to find that path forward and deal with whatever this new normal is going to be for all Manitobans and Canadians.
Well, thanks, Chuck. And you and I have carried on this conversation for a lot of years, and I hope we continue for many more years to come, and let our people be safe and healthy. And may we emerge stronger with greater resolve in the Prairie region to live up to this exciting potential. And not only for us, but for those who will follow. And thank you personally and to your members for your very constructive and, may I say, independent voice of business leadership in Manitoba. Your independence is so valuable. And it makes what you say and your commentary about events around the country and around the province that much more impactful. So thank you for all of that. And I look forward to our next chat.
Excellent. The Honourable Jim Carr, the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg South and a Special Representative for the Prairies, was joining us here today on behalf of all of our members. Of course, a huge thank you to Jim for taking the time with us.